tēnā koutou e aku rangatira, kua hui mai nei ki tēnei hui huinga ki te kōrero I ngā kaupapa, ka nui te mihi ki a koutou, ko Paul Goulter tako ingoa, no Seden a hou, ko Tapawa nuku tamonga, ko Awatiri te awa, no reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. And what's going to happen to me, I'm going to get a whole lot of post-it notes from these people criticising my pronunciation. They're writing it already. I just want to quickly reflect on what Angelo was saying there, and for you to recognise the lead role that NZI Aotearoa plays in that campaign. We are joined at the hip with unions in America, England, Norway, Aussies obviously, in leading that campaign, all right? We're just not passive observers, we're right there in the leadership, and in fact, last year Angela and I got so frustrated at the lack of grunt behind that campaign. I flew to Sydney and we sat in a room in the New South Wales Teachers Federation in an afternoon and just designed that whole campaign. That's the leadership that we're doing in that fight against commercialisation and privatisation of education. And we're not doing that simply because it feels good. We're doing it because that stuff is in our country and it's coming our way. As for the other things he said, it'll keep. Okay. What I want to do is focus on the year ahead, but I want to deal with really the context of what's happening politically at the moment. And of course, it's all bad news. We seem to have a government that's bulletproof, or at least the Prime Minister. I mean, I don't know what more can shift opinion against him. A Prime Minister that thinks it's cute to go and pull young women's ponytails. I mean, what an embarrassment to this country. I was overseas when that happened. We were a standing joke. But he's bulletproof, although we are seeing the signs of arrogance of a third-term government and a government that's totally focus group driven. But it's a government that displays all the meanness we find in right-wing governments. It's a government whose only response to years of budget deficit under its management is to say, let's have more tax cuts. It's a government that's overseeing actually the introduction of two New Zealands. The New Zealand that lies within the Auckland orbit and then the rest of the country. Outside of Auckland's orbit, and we know in many places inside Auckland of course, the economy is in a wretched state as those rivers of milk run dry. Our last conference was themed around inequality, and I bet there's no one in this room prepared to say it's got any better than since last year. That flow of wealth from labour to capital under this government's watch is obscene. And yet it's still not good enough for them, as they attack the fundamental rights of working people to have their share, in fact now any share. Its only so-called bright idea is to further privatise core government services, and that means education, through an ingenious investment bank-driven social investment policy, of which John Key and Bill English are currently parading around the world. This is where the government sells off core government functions to private providers, funded by investors through social investment bonds, and those investors are then rewarded by the government on the basis of the money they've saved from the private sector performing the function. Now, if that sounds like a money go round and enormously complicated, it is, but it's coming our way, and it is the way that our core government services will be privatised. Housing, it's happening. Mental health services, it's happening. And if we're going to follow overseas in early childhood education, it's coming our way. In education, this government is both radical and conservative, as it attempts to radically change the system to suit its germ analysis and its germ agenda. At the same time, it's being conservative in its approach. Clearly, this minister was told before she embarks on any further reform, that she needs to embed those that she has already flagged. Hence, what you heard yesterday and that unrelenting emphasis on IES, on funding, the Education Act review, PLD, special ed, early childhood education and national standards. And before I move on, I just want to look at what this means for schooling. I just want to quote some research from Liz Gordon, a well-known public education researcher. And she put some stuff together earlier this year, and her first finding is that parents are making school choices based not on education, but on social economic grounds. Translated, what that means is that between 1996 and 2014, high decile schools have become larger and low decile schools, 1 to 4, have become smaller. And we all know in this room that in education, size does matter. And when we dig into this result further, we find predictably that school choice has led to a massive loss of Pākehā children from low decile schools. Yes, as we know, white flight's alive and well in Aotearoa, New Zealand. In 1996, in decile 1 to 5 schools, 39% of students were Pākehā. In 2014, that had shrunk to 25%. Only 0.5% of Pākehā students in the system attend decile 1 schools. 3/4 of Pākehā students now attend decile 6 to 10. And the prime reason for this is through a phenomena known as commodification of schooling. It's where parents and governments see education as a privatised good, a commodity for which they must use their resources as parents to compete for desirable spots, places in high decile schools. And the inequality gap, heavily weighted against Māori and Pasifika, means they don't have the resources to compete. And let us be totally clear, any student's best school must be their local public school. Like it or not, our education system is changing, and we're going to talk about in the next session about the move from schools to schooling. Actually, much of that is being driven by the sector itself, as schools find and leverage the benefits of collaboration across schools. And for those sorts of changes, there's nothing inherently wrong in that change, especially as the sector, you people, are actually driving parts of that. But the real struggle is how do we shape system change to ensure it aligns with our beliefs, not theirs, our beliefs. To do this, we must have clarity around those goals, and our direction to get there must be made clear. But that clarity around direction is not enough. We have to build up momentum around that direction. And the best example of this approach is our work on IES. And I'm just going to take some time on this to get you to understand the importance of direction and momentum. We opposed the goal that John Key announced. A top-down, one-size-fits-all managerialist model focused on structures, schools. It's what we call a supply-side model. The government supplies, made up and supplies the answer, communities of schools, and there's only one answer. But as we went through that debate, we identified our own goal, a flexible bottom-up model driven by what schools and ECE identify as needed to drive effective collaboration, and we heard that over the last few days. It's a demand-side model in that schools and centres should be able to demand, to ask for those resources to drive effective collaboration built around the learning pathway of the child. So get the difference: causes, structures, boring; learning, pathways, children, interesting. Where do we want to get trapped? We want to be on that picture there about the learning pathway of the child, a dynamic notion, not a structural notion. So with clarity around those goals, we then set our direction, our journey to achieve that goal. And like any journey, it has to start with a step. A single step in the right direction And this journey takes time, and like any significant journey, it's made up of many steps. But that's not enough. We also need momentum. Complaining to John Key was never going to cut it. We needed industrial and professional momentum. And remember, our key core strategy as NZEI, leveraging our industrial and professional capacity. And we used that to force the government to negotiate with NZEI, and then we did it. We have embarked on that new direction. It's our journey. We've taken those first steps, but we're not there yet at all. But it's our journey based on our beliefs and using our momentum. And there will be many more steps as we journey forward to overcome those points of disagreement and sticking points, but we have direction and we have momentum. Our strategy always was to supersede communities of schools, and that's now being realised. By supersede, I mean getting ahead of them around our vision of what was needed. And as the terms of reference signed between Peter Hughes and me state, communities of learning have now superseded, expanded past communities of schools. And I'll put to you that communities of schools are now a thing of the past. They are a figment of history. You heard the Minister doesn't use that language anymore, and that's her game, all right, whatever. But fundamentally, the game has changed. And communities of schools will disappear as we replace with that model based around our beliefs. And it's at all times in this debate we must keep in view, not in the rear view mirror, but in view forward, that what we're doing is about the child. And having made this progress so far, we've got to continue that momentum around our direction. We have the logic of evidence, of common sense, and of sector-wide support behind us, and we must not lose that in our next stages. So in confronting this challenging future, this fight for quality public education, we need a plan. It just doesn't happen by chance. While we fight the germ and system change based on that belief in choice and competition in the market that underpins that model, we must be focused, have clear direction, and have momentum. We cannot be spread too thin. That is a major risk for this organisation. We cannot continually be diverted. There are strategic choices that continually have to be made, and our National Executive is currently finalising our next 3-year plan based around those strategic choices, about the areas we need to focus on and why, and within our high-level goal of advancing quality public education. And these areas are inclusive and special education, the joint initiative, our fight for support staff, professional learning and development, public provision of early childhood education, success for all Māori, the 2017 general election, system change, and stronger together. And this is the last area I want to focus on, stronger together. Our principals and teachers' collective agreements are up for renegotiation. Those negotiations are starting in a few weeks. This is major. We have a major battle on our hands, and unless we're stronger together, we'll lose it. And I'll tell you what, I don't sign up to lose, and I don't think anyone else here does. But unless we get with that, we are going to lose it. Using that direction and momentum analysis, there's 2 directions we're pursuing. The first is a sensible wages outcome that reflects cost of living, the contribution of teachers and principals to education, the pressures of your jobs, the need to make up lost ground. You all know that, and you can articulate that far better than me about what that means on the ground. Our second direction in this campaign is time. Time. As the Joint Initiative Working Party found, and as every teacher and principal now tells me, you need more time to do your job properly. We have to fix this problem. And it won't happen by asking nicely. We've tried that. We need outcomes from this negotiation that gives you more time to do the job you know that needs to be done. if we're to lift the educational success of every child. And this is the magic space that frames our campaign: lifting education success for all. The public will support our arguments if they are framed around achieving the necessary conditions to lift educational success for all. But to get that support from the public, we need to mobilise around that direction. And I'm going to put a challenge to you. Do we have the momentum at the moment to drive this campaign, this direction? Are our members behind those two directions and that campaign? Do they even know about it? Do they care? And I'll gently suggest to you, in the nicest and gentlest possible way, the answer's no. And we cannot accept that state of affairs, can we? We cannot accept going into a major round based around our professional values and beliefs with one hand tied behind our back. We have to build momentum. We cannot accept that state of affairs now or ever. We have to build momentum around that campaign and the negotiations for your collective agreements, not just for principals and teachers this year, but on into support staff, kindergartens, etc. next year, because if we don't, we will lose. This government is not for turning unless we make it turn. We have to leave this hui and go back to our branches, our schools, our centres, our area councils, our ATs and KPs, and build that momentum for the negotiations next term, term 1, term 2. It's going to take that long to win this. We have to have an engaged, active and forceful membership, united together around that bargaining, forceful, directed and focused, stronger together. And in conclusion, let's be clear, we're in this for the long haul. 132 years, we don't walk away from stuff. The other lot walk away from it, not us. The skill, the DNA of this union is not just to discern opportunity amongst a sea of threats. It is to then seize the opportunity that presents itself. We know, just like the extended struggle for the joint initiative, for career pathways and central funding for our support staff, pushing public funding for early childhood education at 100% qualified, the recovery of special education, and all the other battles that we're fighting, that we just don't win these enormously complicated issues overnight. We win them battle by battle, step by step on that journey, by being strategic, secure in our direction, secure in our beliefs and values, and united in driving that momentum. I don't bring you any easy path. There are no easy paths forward in this struggle. But I do bring you a relentless, a directed, a focused, a strategic, and a united pathway to win. Let's just get out there and do it, stronger together. Stronger